It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus firm. At the Norfus firm, we solve people problems, and we have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on HR and DEI and workplace culture issues. So, we're back.
We're back.
Like right away. Like we didn't actually go anywhere, but
Clearly, it's because we have the same clothes on. So
yeah, like we're still here. We're still here on our couches. Which, by the way, great move. Great move.
Man, it was a game changer for me, actually.
Yeah, this has been like we really get to be like you and ourselves. We're in our favorite places to be, at home.
That's it.
So last episode we were talking about this concept of the way that the world's changed. Come inauguration day is that everything's political in 2025. And I used to be a staunch no politics at work lady. In fact, we talked about it heavy in November, like just don't do it, right? And so, like I said in the last episode, I realized that's an outdated best practice that I was toting. And I'm always up for a change and evolution. And so here we are. And now I'm saying you can't avoid politics at work. I think you're saying that too, but I was really strong on that one.
Yeah, you were.
That was because I think about that clip we had. We might have to insert it in here where you're like, we should insert it in here where you're like, so I'm just curious. Is there some way? Just because you were baiting me, like rage baiting me, really, and I'm like, and she's like, so yeah, now we're back saying.
Are there ways to talk about politics that are acceptable? Ooh. Your face. She's like, don't do it. No, but what are the ways? Can you?
There are really no viable ways because
interesting.
If you're thinking about it, it has to start for a conversation to be productive, even if like ours was, we didn't cuss each other out. We just don't agree, right? And that's okay.
Right.
It has to start from a baseline of assuming good intent and the like. And so if right now what's happening is people's presidential choices become a proxy for something for people. Yeah, we got to talk about politics at work.
Well, we don't have to talk about politics at work, but we can't avoid that politics may come up at work.
Okay, that's fair. I was swinging all the way the wrong other way, right? Like now y'all talk about it all day, every day. All right, so now we got to figure out how do we create the container for these types of discussions.
Right.
And we love a framework.
Yeah.
And we have one here.
Yep.
Because exactly. What would we be without a framework and some steps, right?
Yes.
So if you're thinking about safe containers for political discussions, or really any topic that has a potential charge to it, right? So this is not limited to political discussions, although the topic of our discussion today. So there's 4 elements. So the first is clear conversation parameters. Mm-hmm. You as a facilitator do that well. So what are some examples of clear conversation parameters?
I mean, I think it's really around like, first of all, talking about being clear on what we're talking about and then how we're going to talk about it. Meaning, what agreements are in place in terms of how we want to engage with each other, guidelines, right? Like we want it, all of this has to be grounded in whatever code of conduct or behavioral norms or culture type things that happen within the organization, right? So it's just reminding folks that this is still the lane that even though we're going to have this conversation or not necessarily encourage it, but we're like, all right, it's going to happen. Just reminding folks often that, all right, this is what's acceptable here with these types of conversations.
And draw that out a little bit more. When you're saying reminding folks, are you saying some kind of communication plan or like intent?
Yeah, I think, because yes, this can happen around political conversations, but this is any sort of like conversation that this is just general. How do we communicate with each other in the organization? Right. So political conversations are a type of conversation, but you're having all sorts of types of conversations with people that could potentially be contentious all day, every day. So it's more so let's ground ourselves in what's acceptable here within this organization. in terms of how we talk to each other and what our behavior should be, to what we respect, whatever the values are, all those things. It's just reminding folks that, okay, this you can't just fly off the handle and talk to people however you want to talk to people because you're having a political conversation. No, you still need to stay within whatever norms we've established here, okay? Because we're still at work, right? Like, you're not in the street, guys. You're at work.
Yeah, and I love this because this is getting at, like, this is a very, and we're going to keep talking about this, right? This is a prime time to reset expectations for your workplace, right? What does good look like? What does being, a good corporate citizen look like, right? Be really clear and not super verbose, and not good should not have 25 components to it, right? What are the top 5 things that you want to see from folks? Period. Right? People can work with up to 5. Tell us what that is, and let's work from there. Right? Like the days of like packing a 93-page employee handbook with all these rules and standards are dead. Right? But what's not is being clear about what's okay in your work, like what is acceptable, unacceptable in the workplace. And like when you create these conversation parameters, it is not just like you're saying for political conversations. It's in general. How do I expect for folks to engage it here, right? From a place of like, that way we're not on this slippery slope of, well, she did that and he did that and now I can't do, and it's like nobody can do this. No. Right? And and this is the time for y'all to step up as leaders and enforce your rules and stop being scared about it.
And if they aren't there, then you need to, this is an opportunity to create some and put some in place. Because I mean, we work with organizations of all sorts of different sizes. And so some organizations have very established codes of conduct and rules around like how to engage. Others don't, just because they're just either smaller companies or younger in their journey, whatever it is. But just make sure that you if you haven't, please do so. Because again, you want to have something to orient people to around this.
You have to have that. Like, if you think about, and unfortunately, it is actually the majority of companies that we work with don't have clear containers for conversation or conversation parameters, right? It doesn't exist. And so then what is happening is people using their own discretion about what's appropriate and inappropriate, which, as you know, without shared language, everything is a mess. Like, then everybody is just running amok. And so these issues come up and will continue to come up every day. And so, again, number one in this framework are these clear conversation parameters. And they will suit you, especially when you apply them. And I'm telling you, where we see folks fall down is they say it loud and then they don't do anything to enforce it. Right. Because they don't want to be confrontational and they don't want to be rude or they don't want to get sued. And it's like, you're going to get sued no matter what. So like, really and truly, right? Like, when I see some of these claims coming through, people are going to have a problem no matter what. I have claims coming through where the employer has done everything they can to accommodate the employee and they're still like, it's not
still getting sued.
And so it's like, it's going to happen. So just create your rules and apply them. Remind people what the rules are when you're seeing them outside of the rules. It has always been legal to do this as long as what your rule is legal. So just do it, right? Stop playing, because it's like you're making it harder by not having a standard that you stick to, right?
Right.
All right. So the second thing is manager training. So we establish what the conversation parameters are, and we need to train managers on it. And look, training almost becomes like a catch-all for everything, right? And we meaning like train and train and train. And I feel very strongly that one training is not going to change behavior. One training is more of a check the box. See, we told them. And if they acted a fool, it's not because we didn't tell them.
Right.
What do we mean when we're talking about train managers on this topic?
I mean, training, there's an element of this where it's like you have to empower the manager to be able to hold the space for it in the container. Like if they see it, or if someone brings an issue to them, they can actually, they know what to do with it when it shows up, as opposed to, again, ostriching or trying to push it to the side. And so they need to have maybe some facilitation tools. Like how do you actually facilitate these kinds of conversations when these things come up within your teams. Maybe it's an ability to maybe there's some coaching, like train the trainer, kind of like how do you coach an employee, right, who may be having an issue with someone else around this. Like there's some coaching tactics that you as a manager need to have in your toolkit to be able to apply in those situations. So and the training, it's to your point, it's not one and done. These are multiple trainings that need to happen, because you don't acquire these skills from one training. You have to have an opportunity to practice these things in order to get better at them. Because again, you get the training, somebody shows up, you guarantee you're gonna mess it up that first time. You're probably gonna mess up. So you need to have a way to constantly reinforce the training. And so it's more of a development, which speaks to an issue that, in terms of manager development in general, like that's a whole thing that's fallen to the wayside. But this is a part of that. It's like how can you really support your employees well, and so that they feel supported is a big part of that also.
Well, I mean, also, since we know we're sort of in this odd reset stage where up is down and down is up and all of that, you have to give your manager some kind of tools, right? And I think that the piece of all of this is that this is where you have to sort of think about, well, what's going on in current times? We're a social media society. People are not focusing on things for more than a couple minutes at a time, like fully. And so if you're still doing the same modality of training, of sit somebody in front of somebody or a computer for an hour and a half and like just hope for the best, right? Like have someone talk at them basically for an hour and a half, man, it's not going to shift behavior. And when we're asked to do longer sessions, we make sure that it is so action packed, so participant driven. Like you're not going to sit in one of our trainings and just sit there and listen to us. I mean, right. That's not how we roll. But our preference is when we've been able to convince clients to let us do a 15 to 30 minute training over an 8-week period, right? Where we're asking for a smaller amount of time, but more often, because we know that's how you build the habit. And when you're talking about strong management practices, they're habits, right? And like my first time with the clarinet, I did not know how to play anything. I was not amazing at all. You know what I'm saying? And you were talking about this last night with your art class, right?
Yeah.
Like it's starting off slow, but in a good way, right? Like
Very
you
slow.
taught me something about tinting and shading.
Yes, exactly.
That's like,
yeah, but you have to break it all the way down, and you have to take your time with it, and you have to have an opportunity to practice it, and coming back and, okay, so what did you learn in this, or what came up for you during this? Like for the managers, when you're dealing with an employee, something may come up, and you get to bring that back to the training the next time you do it, in order to talk through it with the facilitator or whatever it is. But and then maybe get some, okay, now in this particular scenario, this is how you could work it differently. But it has to be that level of interaction and frequency in order for this to stick, especially when you're holding space for these kinds of conversations. They're delicate and they're sensitive and they're nuanced. And so you, as managers, there's a lot of skill that you have to develop that takes time to develop. So there's an element of patience in this as well.
Yeah, and so I think this is another like good plug in place for a lot of the data that we collect. And the data that we collect, as we've always said to y'all, like really and truly, the first issue that is common and comes up almost in every assessment as number one issue for employees is, how do I grow my career? Like, what's my career advancement look like?
Right.
The number one, we don't talk as much about the managers, but when we are interviewing senior leaders or do focus groups with managers, the number one issue is, how do we manage people today? Right? I don't feel equipped. I don't feel like I have the tools to manage, which the fact that comes up so often, and again, employers are not prioritizing fixing that, is so bizarre, because people are telling you, I'm struggling to manage people because I don't know what to do. I was an engineer just put into this job because I've been here a long time. Wasn't grown to be a manager, right?
Yeah.
Like we hear it all the time, and they are very self-aware. Like, I feel bad. I don't think I'm doing my best.
Right.
Like, and so then it's like that creates like a wellness issue for managers, right?
Oh man, we see it all the time. They get stuck in the middle and catching hell from both sides, right? Like the employees are giving them hell, their leaders are giving them hell, and they're just like, but y'all haven't given me what I need in order to really succeed here. And it feels a little bit like a setup a lot of times, how people talk about it, right? To your point, you're really good at your job. You've been there for a long time. You get put into this managerial position, but it's not like in the engineering role you were like you were training to be a manager. You were engineering, like you were doing that work. Like, so it's weird. It's weird how these employers just assume that you can put someone over people, which arguably is probably your most important asset, right? And then not give them anything to help them succeed in managing these people. Like, it's insane when you think about it.
And then it creates fear, right? And as we know, scared money don't make no money.
Right. Sure doesn't.
So if you have folks walking around afraid to make a mistake because they don't know how to manage, you're not going to get people's best work. I mean, and that, again, like, all of this is geared at getting folks best work when they come into your workplace. Like, and so I just don't understand what we could talk about this another day, because this is a philosophical thing, like why you wouldn't want to make sure that you have great people practices consistently applied so that you have managers who are comfortable and confident about managing folks, right? You have leaders who knows what the difference is between a leader and a manager, and they're comfortable navigating those spaces, right? Like that level, like, why don't you want people feeling confident about how they deliver their work? Like, I don't understand that.
It's weird. It's weird. Yeah. And it always comes down to like a cost thing. It's like, well, that's silly. This is a big investment.
You are costing it. I mean, look, it might be time to revisit how folks do their balance sheets, because the things that they put on that are on the balance sheets that make it seem like they're doing a really good job are often a ruse, because you go in here and you talk to these people and they're like, this place sucks. So you're kind of successful on paper, or successful in spite of yourself, or I don't know. But the reality is give your people the tools they need to do a good job for you, right? So step one is what is a good job? Creating those clear conversation parameters. Number two is train the managers who hear these conversations and will inevitably be stuck in the middle of them at some point. Put them in a position to be able to handle those situations confidently. Right. All right, now our third step is structured dialogue spaces when you need them.
Yeah.
Your world.
So this one is
Talk about this.
This one's interesting because, when we were getting through the pandemic early, like 2020, 2021, 2022, and then after the murder of George Floyd, we facilitated a lot of sessions, a lot of listening sessions. So this is, speaking to that structured space, the dialogue spaces. We created a lot of that for our clients, just for folks to have an opportunity to come in and express themselves and process, with peers, what they're feeling and what's heavy on them, right? And that was effective then. Not sure if it would be as effective now, right? Like, that's something to kind of work through.
Yeah, I asked you that yesterday. You got stumped.
Comes back to the data, right? It's like what makes sense for the people in your organization. What are they asking for? And if you are going to do them, like, the ones that we did were very formal for the most part. Again, they were facilitated, and and there was a topic that we covered, and it was, and it was, that was what it was. And it was very much like, okay, well, we're doing this in order to hold space for you, but also to get some information in terms of how we can be better in terms of the employers and what the employees need. Now, I don't know. I feel like people are like, I don't really trust y'all a lot of times. So I'm going to go figure out what support I need outside of here. Just know that I'm not okay, kind of thing. But if people want that, again, going back to the data within the organization, you also be clear about what kind of space you're creating, and then what role you're playing in it, right? Like, what resources you're giving to it and what role you're playing. Because again, based on what we saw before, folks wanted the employer to do something and to fix something. I don't know if there's a do or a fix here, other than creating the space for it and making sure that it feels, quote unquote, safe right? Like you've given resources to it, you found a facilitator, someone who knows what they're doing, or you've trained someone in your organization to be able to do this, right? And then that's it. But you got to be clear with your people on what this space is and like what are the parameters around it.
We've gotten called in a number of times of DIY sessions that leaders try to have that run amok. I just want to be so clear on this point. You need a professional, an expert in facilitation. If you plan to actually create space for people to have conversations about these times, you cannot do it yourself if you are not an expert in this. There are so many landmines, particularly in 2025, with having these structured discussions, that if you think you're doing a good thing by saying, let me just get my team together and oh no, don't do that. That's like a setup. And we definitely struggled with like how effective some of these sessions were when employers were just kind of saying, oh, here's some facilitators, just go talk to our people. And we're like, hold on, hi, what are you going to do with their feedback? And there was one client in particular where we had to say, we're not going to do these sessions anymore for you, because every single time employees are like, so what is our employer going to do about it? What are they going to do with this information? And we were stuck because we're like, we don't know. We keep asking them, and we're not about to be in here creating confusion too. We don't have the answer. We don't work here. We're not the decision makers. Like, we're here to help support a process that we thought the employer had, but when they didn't, it's like, no, we're not going to play in people's faces for you. Like, that's not going to happen. And so, look, these structured discussions are sometimes really helpful, but a lot remains to be seen in 2025 when, as we're saying, just about everything is political. So we just want to be really careful and thoughtful there, that is a great step if you are really prepared for the fullness of it.
Right.
If you are prepared for the fact that people are going to expect something out of it. So to your point of the clarity on the front end is, we're doing these sessions for this. We will do this with the information. If you're not willing to do that, then just let people talk on their own, because they already have the right to do that. We tell employees that all the time. You can have groups without your employer sanctioning it, meaning you have a right to talk about the terms and conditions of your employment with 2 or more people under the National Labor Relations Act, right? So that an employer does not have to act to create these spaces, because people already have the right to talk to each other about these things, right? So it's just got to be a very intentional decision is, I guess, the point we're trying to make.
Yes. It has to be very intentional, and you have to resource it properly, like most things, right? You have to make sure that you are, to your point, prepared to deal with whatever could come out of this, and being really clear in the onset of what the intention is and where you're willing to take it. So
yeah. And so then the last step is making sure there's escalation and feedback mechanisms. And this is the world I live in, right? People need to understand how they can raise a concern, right? If they've tried to work it out themselves, or they're not comfortable trying to work out it themselves, or they're hearing conversations or things that they feel ostracized by, how do they go and raise that concern? And to whom? And I will tell you, it's fascinating, because in all my investigations, I ask some similar questions of every single witness. And one of them is, have you taken harassment and discrimination training? And oftentimes people say yes. They may not remember when the last time they took it. They may be like, I think we did. I think it was part of this. Okay. And then the next question I ask is, if someone's being bullied or discriminated against or harassed, what do you understand that they should do with that concern? Meaning, what should that person do with their complaint? And it's fascinating to hear still people saying, well, I'm not really sure. If it were me, this is what I would do. I think you're supposed to do this. And that is always sort of surprising to me, because I think that should be the easiest thing for people to know. Like, when they're being onboarded and throughout, is like, where do they go if they have concerns? So then if people don't know where to go when they have concerns, you also start to see stuff spilling out everywhere, right? I'm seeing a lot more concerns that are raised to board members of an organization, because people don't feel like they can go to anyone else, or they don't feel like other people will solve it for them. And that's why when we're saying spend the time to give people the tools to be successful, it's for these types of reasons, because when you don't, it spills out into places you're not wanting it to spill out.
Mhm.
If you have someone going to like the chair of your board of whatever size organization you have saying the CEO is mistreating everybody, that's a hard place to start from. And that means no matter what the CEO says, something went awry here where they don't even feel like they can use the procedures inside the place to get this solved. They have to go to your boss, basically, which is, the board. And so it's important to create the safety around being able to raise concerns. It's important to be clear about how you do that, and then obviously acting upon concerns that are raised.
So how does that work in this current like political climate? So like, how far do the employers need to take it when they're establishing these escalation and feedback mechanisms, given how charged everybody is? Like, is there anything additional that they need to do, they need to be mindful of as it relates to this stuff, or is it just business as usual, whatever channel you
Well,
currently?
I think the biggest thing is like, and I don't, I really actually mean this seriously, is that if you are a leader and you don't have a therapist, please go get one, because you're going to hear a lot of concerns. Like you hear. I was talking to a law firm partner yesterday who was was asking me to do an investigation, and he was telling me a little bit about it, and I was listening to him, and I'm like, everything is a complaint, right? And when you have policies and procedures, you can't just disregard them as because you don't think that's that big of a deal. So when I say go to therapy, I mean help build some emotional stamina, because people are going to have a lot of concerns, and a lot more and a lot nuanced than before, right? Again, like these things, you're like, really, that's a complaint. Okay. All right. All right. Right. And so I think it's a lot of that. Resource yourself as a manager or a leader. Read the 4 agreements, because the most important thing that we have right now is not to take anything personally, because most of this stuff is not about you as a leader, but what people are bringing to work. And
Right.
so, again, it's like you can't be an expert in everything, but don't lose the stamina around the concerns that folks have, because again, that's where the trouble comes in, is
Right.
when you kind of disregard them or think they're not that big of a deal. And then it just, next thing you know, is everything's boiled over, and now you have 20 problems instead of 1 problem. And you've got CEOs focusing on complaints being raised by an hourly employee because they went so far. And it's like, not that a CEO shouldn't care about an hourly employee, but it's more that the types of things that we're seeing leaders having to spend time on, it's like, man, this was avoidable. And now a lot of money is being spent in your time and my time and other people's time, trying to solve something that could have been addressed through proper resourcing in the first place, right? So like, you get to this place of all this messiness without structure, without discipline, and then it's much harder to fix once it starts to boil over.
Right. Yeah.
So, if we look back here, last episode was about why it's going to be hard to avoid politics in the workplace these days. And here we talked about how you can create containers for it through a 4-step framework. First step being create the parameters. What are the conversation parameters? And not just for politics, right? That started this conversation, but for any kind of conversation. So step 1 is, what is good here? What is not good here? And how do you make that so clear to your employees regularly? Step 2 is train your managers. The people, especially middle management, they deal, like you say, Shanté, they deal with the most. They get it from the top, they get it from the bottom, they get it from all of the ways. Put them in a position to be successful and confident and not fearful of every move they make, because every move they make could somehow be offensive to somebody. Number 3, if you decide, and again, this is a very intentional decision, if you decide to hold space for these types of conversations. When I say these types of conversations, I mean about the ongoings of the world. Get an expert and really take your time to think about it. Do not just plop something on people's calendars saying, here's a session being facilitated by whoever. Don't do that. Like, be really thoughtful about how you create these containers for structured conversations, because remember, employees can always go and create community for themselves on their own without your money, without your time, without your focus. So if you're going to do those things, be thoughtful. And then finally, make sure folks know how to raise concerns. And that's number one. Number two, when you get the concerns, don't disregard them. More often than not, you're probably going to have to do an investigation to make sure that there aren't underlying discriminatory or harassing or bullying type behaviors in your workplace. And so, yes, it can be like, oh God, are they complaining again? That feeling is understandable, but don't lose that stamina. So if you're a leader and don't have a therapist, get one so you can help build some of that resilience, because we're in for a little bit of a ride here. This also brings up for us what we're going to talk about next, which is wellness. Shanté in particular is a well-being queen and has worked a lot with a lot of our clients on these types of initiatives, but pre-2025. So what does wellness look like in 2025? Since we've acknowledged in these last two episodes that folks are not okay still, right? You keep hearing us say this. And so what does that look like? You can find us in all the places, the norfusfirm.com/podcast. We are on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. We want to hear from you. Please come listen to us, leave a comment, tell us what you want to what you would love to hear us talk about, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.